Alright, we might be live here. Testing, testing. I think this might actually be up and running. Shows I'm live down here. Shows I'm live up here. So, let's give it a shot. Let's see how well this works. Alright, what we're doing today is partially an equipment test. This is the first live stream I'll be doing. But it's also explaining the Happy News Life. How when people consume the news, when I've observed people consuming the news, it often seems a dissatisfying experience. People get angry, people get frustrated, people get riled up, and this seems unnecessary to me. It seems counterproductive, even. Not only do they have a negative emotional experience, they walk away angry, frustrated, etc. But that way of approaching it, reading the news in an angry or frustrated way, often leads them to a worse understanding of the actual factual events that happened. So I think it makes sense to look at the news in a way that is fun, enjoyable, and leads to a better, more accurate understanding of the current events in the world. All the information that one would seek to get out of the news. So that is what the Happy News Life is all about. And there's a couple of easy tools we can use to do that. What we're looking at here is a tweet grid. This is where if we go through tweets, we can place them in any of these categories. And that way, if you see a tweet that that son of a bitch, he's wrong because of this or that, rather than trying to untangle the whole argument and explain how he's wrong because the guy he supports was more wrong about that other thing, the first thing you can do is just place that tweet on the grid and say, okay, this guy is a C3, or this tweet is a C3. So that means he's doing this or that. And from there, it's much easier to unpack and just establish exactly what is going on. So let's run through a few of these, see how it goes. I just went to Twitter trending. The top thing was this NCAA. Apparently, there's a Supreme Court decision today about antitrust and student athletes getting compensation. I don't really even know the details on it. Haven't read a single news story, but that should not be necessary for using the tweet grid. So let's just take a look at this. Start out with this very first one on the top. Kavanaugh. Everyone agrees the NCAA can require student athletes to be enrolled students in good standing. But the NCAA's business model of using unpaid student athletes to generate billions of dollars in revenue raises serious questions under the antitrust laws. So all this guy's doing is providing a quote from the opinion. Kavanaugh, obviously Supreme Court Justice, and he's the one who authored this opinion. So let's see where we would place this on the grid. First thing, was this was this tweet something that seems productive on its face or counterproductive on its face? I'd say it's productive. He's providing newsworthy information. It's not something like, go screw yourself, buddy. You're a total a-hole. He's just providing newsworthy information, citing a direct quote. So that places it in the top half of this grid somewhere. And then next question, is this plainly stated or emphatically stated? Meaning, is he just laying out the facts, or is he rah rah rah? This is it like, aw snap? Is he trying to slay, or is he just stating something? And I think it's pretty clear that it's plainly stated. Again, entire thing is a direct quote from the opinion, except that first word, which is just the name of the person giving the quote. So I think we're in these top 4 boxes. And then question is whether this was in good faith or bad faith. That's one of the trickier distinctions on this grid, because sometimes you can see a tweet that it's, facially productive. It seems like the way it's written is made to appear that it's trying to do something productive, but they're actually doing it in bad faith. They're trying to undermine someone else. They're just trying to, whatever. They're acting in bad faith. But I don't see that here. This feels like it's good faith. Again, just quoting directly from the opinion. Seems like a relevant part of the opinion, at least from what I've seen. So I think we're in these top 2 boxes. And which of those it's not one of those two, it's both of those 2 boxes, because it depends who's viewing it, the in-group or the out-group. Just about every tweet is going to have different reactions. This applies to political tweets. And so just about every one of those is going to have different reactions, whether you're the in-group or out-group. Now, for the most part, political stuff these days is so polarized that the in-group and out-group is just red and blue, Democrat and Republican, but there are some different lines that are drawn. You could talk about the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party versus the more establishment corporatist party, the Trump wing of the Republican Party versus the Mitch McConnell wing, etc. So this is one where really it's hard to picture a large demographic that is against this decision, because the Supreme Court was unanimous in ruling this. This unpaid student athletes is something that's been in pop culture for a long time. People arguing about how unfair that is. So there are probably some people who take issue with it, but most people are going to fall into this in group here. So that's where we put this tweet. Boom. Easy enough. Let's move on to another one. Let's try to find some ones that are a little bit more juicy. Some of these are just, the ones that are just reciting news headlines are going to be that same basic category. Alright, let's see. This person's giving a little bit of context, or a little bit of opinion here, a little bit of analysis. I only ran NCAA for a year, But honestly, the amateurism rules were so over the top that our coaches had to sneak us granola bars after multiple hour practices, and I had to turn down a $50 cash prize at a local turkey trot for chips and salsa instead, if I recall correctly. So this one, again, seems productive on its face. It's talking about the at hand news thing. And then, is it plainly or emphatically stated? I'd say this one is plainly stated. It's it's not as cut and dry as the last one where it was just literally writing out a quote. But this could have been, all capitals. Had to sneak us some mother effing granola bars. I had to turn down, if you can believe it, an actual cash prize. This could have been much more over the top. This is stated pretty sedately. So I think that still falls within plainly stated. And then good faith, bad faith. Again, that's probably the hardest distinction here. I'm leaning towards good faith again on this one. And in group or out group, same question as last time. Most people are going to be in group on this, but for those that aren't, you're in the other group. Okay, so what's this guy saying? Labor icon Brett Kavanaugh? I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just legitimately surprised. Also, if I were the NCAA, I would simply cease to be after this decision. Okay, so let's see what this guy's responding to with that. Kavanaugh floats collective bargaining for student athletes as a potential remedy for what he sees as the NCAA's widespread antitrust violations. And the quote he's citing, of course, those difficult questions could be resolved in ways other than litigation. Legislation would be one option, or colleges and student athletes could potentially engage in collective bargaining. So, let's see where we put this one. Labor icon Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just legitimately surprised. Does that seem productive or counterproductive on its face? I think I'm going to lean towards the bottom half of the grid and put this on failing to add. He's definitely not adding any new facts to the discussion. And in terms of his analysis, the analysis is just like, that Brett Kavanaugh guy is such a piece of garbage. But there's one decision that I agree with, not as garbagey as I would have thought. But I mean, still, that guy's a piece of garbage. I don't see how that furthers the discussion in any way. I don't really see the productive value of that. So I'm going to put that in the bottom half of the grid where it's not productive. But there, instead of looking at good faith and bad faith, we look at failing to add or taking away. Failing to add, I think, that sort of speaks for itself. That's where you're just not contributing anything to the conversation. Taking away is where you're really erecting a roadblock to any further conversation. Right? An example would be someone says the sky is blue, and you say, well, not at night it isn't. Or, You've never heard of Overcast? Things like that. They don't only fail to contribute to the conversation, they move the conversation backwards, make it more difficult to advance the conversation. I don't. Maybe you could argue that's what he's doing here, because he's just making it personal and adding to this partisan animus. But the extent he's doing that is rather minimal. I think it falls more on this third row here, the failing to add. And then is it plainly or emphatically stated? This one's pretty close. I mean, Labor icon Brett Kavanaugh? I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm just legitimately surprised. It, I think I'm gonna put that in emphatically stated. It's definitely not plainly stated. Yeah, I think that's got to be emphatically stated. So, yeah, that's where it is. This one is, C1, C4, depending on whether you're in group or out group. Now, the in group, out group on this tweet is a little bit different because it's not just whether you're in favor or against the decision. It also has to do with whether you're um how lined up you are with Brett Kavanaugh and just the who's on the bench, who you're aligned with. If you're anti Brett Kavanaugh, you're more likely to be in the in group here. If you're pro Brett Kavanaugh, you're more likely to be in the out group. So that one breaks down a little bit differently. Alright, let's do one more of these, and then we're going to move on. This guy's saying that Kavanaugh's opinion is the concurring one, which maybe is true. Again, I haven't even read an article on this. I'm just going off of these tweets, and everyone's talking about Kavanaugh, so maybe that is the case. I think I might have said that Kavanaugh wrote the opinion earlier, which would imply majority opinion. Alright, so let's do this. We're gonna look at some replies to some of these tweets. Let's find one of these with a decent number of replies to it. Now we can get down into the weeds. Start seeing what the hoi polloi have to think about this. Yeah. None of these. Wait, this guy's just here for the ratio. Alright, what's he responding to? So, NCAA statement on the Supreme Court decision. So, I mean, I guess they are getting ratioed 22 comments with 15 likes. But alright, yeah, let's look at this one. LOL, just here for the ratio. That's a common tweet that you see. So, is it productive or counterproductive? I think that's clearly counterproductive on its face. It's not trying to add anything to the discussion. Is it plainly or emphatically stated? I think that's emphatically stated. LOL, just here for the ratio. He's, it's a snap. It's like, boom. The only reason you put this comment is the emotional impact it has. It's not there to convey any factual information. So I think that falls into the emphatically stated. And then is it failing to add or is it taking away? So, yeah, the argument for taking away is that it does exactly what he's talking about, where it increases the ratio, where it just makes whatever statement he's responding to appear less credible, not because of legitimate counter arguments levied against it, but just because of the number of tweets heading in a certain direction. Just because of the way the algorithm adds those up, or, the way, just do that numerical advantage. And that a lot of people, take at least some notice of the ratio. So the fact that he's trying to add to the ratio without adding any substantive discussion does seem to be taking away. If a tweet gets ratioed because there are a ton of people getting on there to criticize him, that's one thing. But if a tweet gets ratioed because a bunch of people decide they want to ratio the tweet and they get on there with stuff like this, then each of those people tweeting stuff like this is not adding anything substantive to the discussion. They're just increasing the ratio, which leads to more people being influenced to think that the original tweet was a bad one simply because of the ratio and not because of the counter arguments against it. So, for that reason, I think we can put this in the taking away. So, this guy's all the way down at D1, D4, depending whether you're in group or out group. Alright, so that was a little rundown on the tweet grid. So if you see a tweet that annoys you, it's a good little way to bring a little order to all the chaos on Twitter, is to just put it in that grid, and then you could make more sense of it after that. But there's a million different ways you could tackle these. That's a decent little uniform system you can use. Alright, let's find a good news article to run through a 5-sheet. I'm just gonna pull up, see what's on CNN right now. They always got some good fake news for us. The states most vulnerable to the dangerous COVID variant. Oh my god, I am so scared. Uh, and whatever. It's just gonna be a bunch of stats and fear mongering. There's not gonna be any useful information in that. Maybe, yeah, if we don't find anything else, we could run through that one just because it's on the top. Yeah, alright, whatever. No low hanging fruit here, so we're just gonna take their lead and do that. Unvaccinated Americans are at risk of an aggressive and more dangerous COVID. Oh, shut the fuck up. It's because I have this private window, so my thing to stop all these auto playing videos is disabled for some reason. Unvaccinated Americans are at risk of an aggressive and more dangerous COVID-19 variant. These are the most vulnerable states. So, wait, more dangerous? I haven't seen anyone claim that if you have it, it's more, the Delta variant is more threatening. The claims I've seen are that it's more contagious. So I think what they're saying here is that it's more dangerous because it's more contagious. But the way they write this headline, more aggressive and more dangerous, implies that you're more likely to get it, and if you get it, you're more likely to get death or serious illness. But we'll break down the article, see what it says, and we'll break it down using the 5 sheet. Alright, let's go ahead and copy that URL in there. I want to run it through the archiver right now, just because we're live. Alright, what was the ostensible argument presented in the story? Wait. Did I click on the wrong one here? Uh-oh. This website is not working right. Great. How long has that had that issue? I must have used this website like 2 days ago and now it's not working right. Well, let's try this. I'm going to pull something up in another window here. Well, this is plumb annoying. Weird. It works over here. Alright, let's see how this works. The internet sucks. Yeah, I just opened it in the other window. Alright, let's just do this. I am going to switch the window capture over to this one. And now we have the page that's actually supposed to load. But I am going to have to look into why it wasn't loading in the other window. Alright. Now, in the meantime, let's pull up this CNN article. Alright. Throw that there. Now, let's look at the title. Is this an opinion or a fact? Unvaccinated Americans are at risk of an aggressive and more dangerous COVID-19 variant. These are the most dangerous states. So, are at risk? I mean, they could say unvaccinated Americans are at risk of lightning strikes. That is factually true in a sense, or shark attacks or something. If they're saying at a risk that's greater than 0, that's greater than 1 in 1 billion trillion, then I think that's factually true. But the headline is clearly implying that there is some significant risk here, which they're not exactly quantifying for us. And, I mean, even vaccinated Americans are at some risk of COVID, right? There are breakthrough cases. These have been reported on. So, I'm going to put this as opinion, and then I'm going to paraphrase the title. Unvaccinated Americans are at significant risk of Delta variant, which is both more aggressive and more dangerous. I'm going to put those words in quotes, aggressive and dangerous. Whatever. The following states are the most vulnerable. So writing out the title this way makes it a little bit more clear exactly what they are saying, which is that the risk is a significant risk and that it's both aggressive and dangerous. That certainly seems to be what they're saying. Maybe that's wrong, but that seems to be where they're going. Okay. So it's good to lay it out, because sometimes they make these titles, they jarble stuff up to make it confusing, misleading. Alright, next thing before we get into reading the article is what known bias of the author or outlet. Madeline Holcomb, I don't know. So we're just talking about CNN. So, what known bias on this topic? So, CNN CNN is committed to the notion that vaccines are the best or only option out of the pandemic. So when you're filling in fields like this, you're using your own personal knowledge, right? There's no dictionary definition of CNN's known bias on vaccines. I'm filling this in based on personal experience reading CNN. Uh, Alright, that's probably enough bias on this issue. Alright, now let's pop in and find the thesis. Some states are making great strides in getting their residents. I don't know if I should read this whole article out loud. Maybe there's some copyright issues there. Alright, here are the states they are not fans of: Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Wyoming. So, look, experts have upheld vaccines as the key to reopening the country safely and containing the variants. So, I mean, that lines up pretty well with that known bias. Many of which are more transmissible. Doesn't say anything about it being more deadly or more likely to cause severe illness or anything. So it's probably, yeah, just that more transmissible means both of these. It's more aggressive and more dangerous. Both of those stem from the fact that it's more transmissible. Or that it's believed to be more transmissible. Okay, well, maybe not. Look, this one says, now it's saying cause more severe disease. Do they have a citation for that? Let's see. No. They have about 100 links, but the thing about more severe disease, they do not have a citation for that one. We'll see, maybe they have it lower down, but they're just stating that as fact, or that it's believed to be. They're saying that is fact. Yeah, so remember what we're doing right now is looking for the thesis. What is this actually arguing? Normally, news you wouldn't expect to be a persuasive writing piece. You'd expect it just to be laying out the facts, but this day, just about every piece of news you see is persuasive writing. They're trying to convince you of, an opinion. So here, they're just talking more about the different areas. Alright, I have a feeling this is where it's going to get into the thesis. We have to acknowledge that there's a long way to go. The problem, though, is that we should be looking at the numbers for each community instead of looking at the US as a whole, because while the US as a whole is doing so much better, there are pockets of the country that have very high vaccination rates. We also have pockets of the country that are actually undergoing massive surges right now, where their hospitals are getting full again. Yeah, okay. So, the thesis seems to be something along the lines like, vaccination efforts should focus on maximizing vaccination rates in certain communities rather than the country as a whole. And that's an opinion. So, what evidence do they have supporting this? Vaccination rates vary geographically. Who is this Dr. Wen? Okay, CNN medical analysis analyst says certain pockets of the country are seeing surges. If there's anything we learned during COVID-19, it's how much we need to be humble in the face of the virus. Well, you haven't showed it yet. Don't you be humble in the face of Dr. Fauci. I mean, he is science. Alright, then whatever. More just standard fear mongering. Alright, let's run through a basic outline of the article. Different vaccination rates in different parts of the country. Focusing on certain communities might work better. Variants are on the rise. Alright. So now we get down into the named manipulation tactics, all of these guys here, and these are defined on the website, 5sheet.com. So let's see if any of these are in the article. I think there might have been some intentionally confusing. Let's look through. Wait, hold up. So I'm going to switch the window capture back to the CNN. Why is that not working? Boom, there we go. Alright, so, let's take a quick look at this little one here. More than 300 million vaccines have been administered, but it's still a long way to go. Now we need to think about trying to push out the vaccine into the community sites where people could get it delivered to them through a trusted intermediary. That's going to mean doctors' offices, schools, places of employment. We need to think about a different vaccine delivery strategy to get people who are still reluctant or who still face challenges getting into those access sites. God, how difficult is it to get those access sites? Or everywhere you go, they're offering vaccines. Uh, well, health experts agree full vaccination offers protection against some variants of COVID 19. When added, it's unknown whether variant resistant to vaccines will emerge. We just don't know. If it's anything that we've learned, it's how much to be humble. Vaccination has been shown as the best way for the US to get ahead of the variants. It's been shown by what? Is it going to explain? A recent study by Public Health England found 2 doses of a coronavirus are, quote, highly effective against hospitalization caused by the Delta variant. Did that speak to transmissibility? How did it compare with natural immunity? The study found the Pfizer vaccine is 96% effective against hospitalization. All right. So that's one I'm gonna mark down. Let's go back to our 5 sheet here and mark a straw man feigning ignorance. Because vaccination has been shown as the best way to get ahead of the variants. That's the little quote we're going to include under straw man feigning ignorance. Why did we include this? Because the studies they cited to underscore this point only discussed vaccines vaccine effectiveness against hospitalization while ignoring transmissibility and natural immunity. Right, so they have this point here, and then they're like, oh, well, that's true because of this evidence. But if you look at the evidence, it doesn't back up the point. It says it's the best way to get ahead of the US, or the best way for the US to get ahead of the variants. If you think, well, best means it's better than the other options. Well, what other options to vaccinations are there? It's, at least the ones I've heard talked about, are natural immunity or some kind of treatment. And they don't mention either of those here. And then when they do talk about the study, talking about how this is about the US getting ahead of the variants, because remember, this whole variant discussion, it's saying you have to get vaccinated to stop the variant spread. Not because it's going to protect you from COVID. It's just we got to stop COVID from spreading in general. Because the more COVID spreads, the more likely it is to create variants. But all the studies they talk about here, they don't discuss spread. They don't discuss transmissibility. They only discuss how likely it is for you to go to the hospital. So they are not addressing the point. That is a deceptive tactic right there. It's nice when you're reading through and you see something that just you know is bullshit and you're kind of getting your goat, but you can just put it into a little box, say, okay, this is exactly why it's wrong. Makes it makes a little less painful to read the news, and it gives you a little bit of a better understanding. So, poison the well. Let's look. This usually comes at the top of the article. Let's see if they did that here. Nothing that bad. I mean, well, okay, let's see. Because they mention all these states that are red states. They're like, oh, those bastards aren't getting vaccinated enough because they're just these dumb yokels. Uh, but it said some states, and that said such as these. So I'm wondering if there's some blue states on this list, and they just chose to include the red ones. So they don't have a list. Less than 35 was their number. Wait, what? Damn it. Well, that thing glitched out. I think I've been taking too long on this. But, alright, let's not worry about that poison the well thing. If there was a poison the well, there was a pretty minor one. Um, yeah, we can maybe argue there was one side of the story here where they didn't have anyone arguing. But you could expect this on any COVID related story. You didn't have anyone arguing that other treatments, which are not patented by pharmaceutical companies, might be an effective path forward. You didn't have anyone arguing that natural immunity is a thing. You didn't have anyone arguing even that this specific approach they're talking about here, targeting these specific communities of concern, that might not be the best approach. You didn't have anyone talking about any of those factors. You didn't have anyone ask, what is herd immunity? When do we think we will get there? Uh, None of that came up. So take that for what you will. But I think that's to be expected with any COVID related story. It's borderline illegal to mention something that's outside of the established narrative. All right. Yeah, statistics lacking context. I think it was. I think we could check that one too. I'm not gonna write it out. Just because we're doing this live. But they threw a ton of stats in this first block here. 45.1%, less than 35%, 500 days, 600,000 deaths, 80%, 50%, 20%. A lot, statistics are some of the most easily manipulated pieces of information. You can put in a certain context or leave out a little bit of context, totally change the meaning of that thing. So, anytime you use statistics that are complicated enough, a layperson wouldn't understand it at face value. You should really have. You should either break it down to the point where it is explained well enough that a layperson could explain it at face value, or have advocates on either side uh, arguing what they claim that it means. But they're not doing that. They're just stating, oh, well, there's these numbers, well, that's just certainly a fact because 20,000. So, no arguing with that. So, anytime you just see someone just right, spitting out a bunch of numbers, that's always a little suspicious. Okay? Um, what was this article trying to convey? What was the takeaway? It seemed like so they're saying, vaccine, vaccine. Everyone's got to get a vaccine. Everyone's got to get a vaccine. And the main issue with this seemed to be we got to find the specific geographical areas where people are not vaccinated enough, and we gotta get those fuckers vaccinated. And the way she phrased it in the one thing was who still face challenges getting into those access sites. That's like 0 people, that doesn't exist. Or who are still reluctant. That's what they're actually talking about. We have to ramp up this overcome vaccine hesitancy through bribes, like lotteries, or through pressure saying you can't participate in public life, you can't have a job, that type of stuff. Start ramping up pressure, start going to these localities with under 35% fully vaccinated and just start grinding those people until we get more more dollars in big farmers' pockets. And the pretext they're using to do that is the Delta variant, which they're claiming is more deadly, but they don't have a citation about that. But who knows? Maybe it is. All right. So I think that's all for today. We had that little tweet grid. Remember, just for any little tweet, you can place it in one of these things. Gives you a good little spot to start figuring out what kind of bullshit that thing's throwing at you in a somewhat objective way. Good little jumping off point. And then we started to run through the 5 sheet, which I've used on here a number of times before. The go-to tool for breaking down news articles, cutting through their propaganda. Alright, well, if you keep using these smart tactics, you will have a much happier news life. Thank you.